It seems sort of cliche, but it's probably the easiest way to go through the story from when you first met. And at some point, the three of you gelled and started playing together. I mean, would you like to talk about how that worked?
Well, the real glue, I think, was the fourth member who's not here, is Anthony Phillips, who was kind of friendly with all of us. You know, Pete and I were sort of close friends. We were good friends, weren't we? Yes.
We were.
It's I'd say that. And Ant and Mike were good friends, and Ant was sort of friendly with Peter and I as well. He was in the same house and stuff. And he wanted to make a tape of some songs he'd written with Mike, and he invited me along to play keyboard. And I suggested that Pete came along, and we did our song as well. We had one song we'd written, which we thought was quite good, and that's what we did.
So we hustled our way into their session.
Do you recall your sort of interest in music at that time? This is kind of later in the 60s. There's a lot of stuff going on out there. What did you like?
Well, I was a pretty bad drummer, so stuff was rhythm, soul, and you know, there was the whole R&B explosion in England, and all. I mean, I think we were all Beatle fans as well as the soul music. But I mean, Otis Redding was my hero at that time, I think.
Your voice, was it fully developed?
My balls had dropped, I think. Yes.
Yeah,
if that's what you mean.
Had a great, really good soulful voice right from the word go. I mean, you know, we used to like Otis Redding and Nina Simone, I suppose, another one. You could sound just like Nina Simone if you wanted to, and all those kind of guys. We used to listen to some Benny E. King, Sam and Dave and stuff.
Just this week, I've been working with this guitarist called Leo Nosantelli, but he was the guitarist on Lee Dorsey. What's it? Brain has gone already.
Working in a coal mine.
Working in a coal mine.
Oh, right.
Working in a coal mine, Get Out My Life Woman. But these were all songs that we were listening to at that time.
God, he must be quite old now, hasn't he?
He's only 68, I think.
Oh, God.
So he was a young man at that time.
I know, but Lee Dorsey felt like an early generation, didn't it? Yeah.
So, Mike, you're essentially teamed up with Ant and Richard initially. How did it come that you finally met Peter and Tony? Were you in different houses?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, school in those days, if you actually played an instrument or thought you could, you were sort of, there was a link, you know what I mean? You felt akin to everyone else who did, I think. That's how I sort of felt it. And Ant was very much the leader with me, you know. In fact, thinking about that session, that first session with Brian Roberts, you know, the alternative was Ant singing. So,
all right,
no wonder.
Well, I have to say that I've been quoted saying this a few times, but you know, he sang the first song because Peter couldn't come for the first day or something, and I said, you know, just why don't you wait till Pete comes? You know, it'll sound a bit better, and it did. I have to be honest. I mean, Ant's voice is about as good as mine, which is probably pretty good, of course, but not as good as his.
It suits some things, though. Because it's quite a thin voice, but, you know, I remember, was Pasadena just instrumental, or was that had a melody? Yeah, and then...
You sang it.
Let Us Now Make Love. He had a few songs of a sort of... with the octave crossover hand feature.
Yeah.
Well, the theory was, I mean, I always believe that anyone can find a way to sing, you know, without a good voice. Just that we never did, do we?
Well, I think it's a matter of opinion.
Anyone can find a way.
I believe so too.
Yeah. He's got to start. You've got to start. Actually, start young enough. Actually, we've got to do.
Yeah, I think in the studios now you can cheat to such an extent that anybody's a singer. Actually, to be honest, I mean, singing is actually, funnily enough, sort of the easiest thing to actually produce a vocal on a record. The most difficult part of being a singer is that ability to project. I think, particularly on stage, which is something that some people have and some people don't.
I mean, some of the most interesting voices are sort of Tom Waits, Randy Newman, Bob Dylan, you know, are not conventional good voices. In fact, I think Dylan's mother said, you know, he doesn't have to sing like that. You should have heard him sing with the choir. You know, and it's, but they have a lot of character and they deliver words incredibly well. And I think that's something you try and learn, is how to tell the story.
We missed our chance. We hadn't even peaked. We could have learned to find a way to sing.
We'd have done it, yeah.
Probably a good thing, actually.
Did you did you have a sense that once you three were together, that you were gelling? I mean, this was the potential for a group. Did you have any kind of sense in being just out there? It wasn't just a fad in school because rock and roll was a.
I mean, was it Eureka? It wasn't quite Eureka, was it?
I think it was writing songs. We originally just wanted other people to do the songs. I think we saw ourselves as performers, any of us actually, really. And it's Mike and Ant who were keener on the idea of playing live. And I think Peter and I originally just helped them out until they found replacements. I think that's how we looked at it. You know?
And I think we were more set on being backroom boys and being the songwriters, and less of the group. The Anon were more the sort of showy group. I think we were, I think, shyer also. So it was coming at it from a different point. But there was an excitement about the songs, and like, you know, any young people who write stuff, we thought we were brilliant, and were quite ready for the world to discover us. And of course, nobody at all wanted to cover our songs. So the only way of getting them out there was to do them ourselves.
You got in touch with Jonathan King, you already made the hit.
Yeah.
And everything's gone to the moon, the hit.
Yeah.
And he's the old Carthusian. So now Jonathan said that you got him a tape.
Well, we were too nervous to sort of give him a tape. So we got John Alexander, who was always helpful and
The lad.
yeah,
That's good.
and seemed a lot braver than we were. So he thrust it into his E-type, wasn't it?
A little weird, actually.
He says it was an MG.
MG, was it? Yeah, I think you're right, MG. But it was very showy for the school at the time.
But the reason we chose him really was because he was the only one. I must be honest, we didn't pick him out of all the people possibilities. It was either him or David Jacobs, his son, went to the school as well. Yeah. So he was a backup.
So was any contact
That's right.
we were trying to exploit?
Now, these were songs that you'd actually written yourself.
Yeah.
It was his first tape, which is 6 songs, 5 written by Anthony, Mike, and 1 written by us, Pete and I. So it was...
And the one you liked was the one
The one you liked was written by us. I just wanted to say that.
Mike remembers that. Funny.
I think what he really liked was Pete's voice, actually, to be honest. I mean, that's the thing. You know, it's enough to make him interested to put money out for us making a series of tapes after that. Coffee.
All right.
Has he got sugar in it? Sugar?
Thank you.
Sugar?
No, sweetie.
It's all right, it's sweet enough for me. Sometimes I think I don't need sugar in coffee, actually, but
Yeah.
other days I do.
Oh, right.
It is a bit...
Hospital coffee. Is that sort of
It's not the best.
We'll just carry on. Carry on with the coffee. It's free.
Free form.
Yeah. Has to be.
Right.
Stuff. Now, what I'm really interested in is the fact that you didn't send him a tape of covers, you sent him a tape of something you'd written.
Yeah.
There was a sense in which you as songwriters were going to get this thing out there with a guy who made a pop record, one hit pop. Were you thinking in those terms? Were you thinking, okay, this is what we need to do? We need to get on to, the top 10 singles.
I don't know if he had a column in Disco Music Echo, but he seemed like an entrepreneur as well. So there was this sense that, if we could get him interested, there might be some doors that would open. And he was interested after this first So, and then we did The Silent Sun, is that right? And then the second tape after that?
Well, no, we did a few tapes before that. We did the original tape, which he liked, and then we did a series of tapes after that, some of which he got less and less interested in a way. And then I think Peter and I reckoned that we didn't want to lose him. It was our only contact. So for any time in our lives, really, we sat down and constructed a song that we thought was right for the occasion a bit, which was The Silent Sun, kind of very Bee Gee-ish, which was his favourite.
He was obsessed with the Bee Gees, so I tried my best Robin Gibb impersonation, and we wrote in the style of.
Which is a song, in fact, in many ways could have been a hit in the period, I think. Fortunately for us, it wasn't, in a way.
I mean, one of the things he stressed yesterday, very forcefully, was that he knows, he said that he was obsessed with the Bee Gees, and he liked to tell you that what he was trying to do was to get him to play more acoustic. Then you would listen to the instruments more, and then he was thinking more of Crosby, Stills and Nash.
I think they were a reference too, yeah.
Had they been done by then? They weren't out by then, were they? Probably still some.
I don't think they were out at that point. He might have thought that's what he wanted.
Yeah.
We later got quite influenced by Crosby, Stills and Nash. We liked that acoustic, effect, and also the harmony work, although we weren't great singers, but we could sing in harmony. We had, obviously had Peter and then later Phil. So it was part of what we used to do.
And then the Birds with 8 Miles High. I mean, there were the harmonies on that were exquisite.
Well, the Beatles were harmonies all the way through anyhow, so...
But without that first album, I'm not sure we'd ever... You know what I mean? It was a lucky moment to get a chance to make a record, in a school holiday sort of thing. It was good for us.
3 days it took to make?
No, it was a day and a half. Nothing like as long as that.
Yeah.
I think we had the studio...
3 days.
It's in the book. Accuracy of your book.
Right? Yeah.
I think we just had a thing we worked throughout. We did actually sort of have we went back, took 3 or 4 hours off in the middle of the night, and went back and did the rest of it. It was
Denmark Street. What was the name of it?
Regent Sound.
Region B.
Wasn't it Region A we did the record?
Was it?
Region B was upstairs, I think,
one of the
basement, yeah.
But it was very exciting for us, really. And we were, but the record, I think I was very happy with the arrangements that were later put on, string arrangements and stuff. It made it sound a bit sort of cheesy. I don't think they were as bad as all that. And kind of still loses sleep over it, but the rest of us, I think, accommodated it.
Yeah. Well, we didn't have the power, really, to argue at that point. I think this was very much... Jonathan had this sort of Beatles idea with the sort of black cover versus the white album, I think had just come out. And so he was sort of getting all entrepreneurial about it, and I think he pictured the strings adding sort of a bit of sweetening to something that was a bit raw.
We'd done The Silent Sun was done before all this, and we'd had strings on that, and to be honest, they sound quite good on that. And for what it is, it works well on that song. So we went that against the idea when it was suggested for the rest of the record, and then it just, a lot of the time, it's just very, we actually we did write some of the parts, didn't we, actually? But they weren't, even so.
But we weren't in the mix. I mean, we didn't know the control master. We weren't involved in the mixing, were we? That sort of thing. It wasn't we just did our bit. He ran the show really.
Yeah.
But it was an interesting taste of what could be happening, sort of thing.
There's a few nice songs on there, I think.
What was the feeling when it must have been a record comes out, you're still at school. I mean, you must have been flavour of the week at least amongst your friends. And what was it exciting?
I remember one of the most exciting moments in my musical career was seeing an ad with our name in the Record Mirror, which I think they'd blagged some deal, and probably because Record Mirror was about to fold and no one read it, but actually to see the letters spelling out Genesis, I remember with great excitement.
Do you remember where you were when you first heard it on the radio?
Well, I remember Silent Sun. We were
at Ant's kitchen.
Was that right?
Yeah.
Which was exciting. But most of us, to be honest, even by the time Silent Sun came out, we'd left school. We weren't there anymore. The first tape we had, obviously, while we were still at school, but so we weren't no longer quite in that sort of, in that area. But
did we all leave the same year? Am I right?
67, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think you might have stayed. I stayed an extra term to do the Oxford entrance or something, I think, but I can't remember.
Yeah, I think I remember.
Did you, leaving school, did you imagine that this was going to be it? You brought out a record, you were going to be in the the hit parade.
I think we had our moments of being quite convinced we were going to be pop superstars, but then reality kept on crashing in. And,
I think buying the clothes, I felt pretty good. Remember,
yeah,
Carnaby Street.
Carnaby Street.
We
Yeah,
went
that
out and
was.
bought the clothes for our first Top of the Pops appearance, which unfortunately never happened. We got the clothes though. Clothes look all right.
Yeah.
It was.
Yeah.
Yeah, we sort of, we were very young. I mean, Ant was only 15 or 16. I don't know. 17 we were. So it was kind of like. It was very exciting for us. And yes, you thought that first moment, you thought, we were going to happen. But I think very soon after that, I think we kind of thought, well, I certainly thought this was not going to be a career, but I would have loved it to have been. I love music, and to be able to do something in music just seemed like a fantasy.
I think all of our parents were quite concerned that we weren't going to be able to earn a proper living, and Plan Bs were encouraged regularly at home.
Sort of thought banking.
No, it wasn't. I mean, well, for me, it was film school. I actually had a place at this London School of Film Technique, which was in Shelton Street at the time. I think it's now, I don't know if it's the British Film School or something, but it was. So that you had.
Well, it was actually university. I went to university. I was there for a year. I mean, I left after a year to do this year of this summer, at least, of sort of helping Ant and Mike out with the possibility of doing it. And at the end of that summer, I got a sort of feeling and excitement sometimes out of it that I thought, you kind of got to give this a bit of a go, And I think we both were kind of a bit iffy about it, but we sort of persuaded each other in a way, I think.
You couldn't bear the thought you might lose out.
I know, well, you said
That's
that.
what you couldn't bear.
I've said that before. Well,
You said it before.
It is sort of true in a way. I mean, if the band had made it, and I hadn't been in it, I would have probably been pretty upset, I have to say. But having said that, it wasn't, it was just a sort of feeling of this was something kind of, you had to see it through. And the university kind of let me take a year off. At the end of the year, we were going to reassess. We were all going to reassess, I think, we had this idea. And at the end of this year, of course, we got nowhere. So.
And actually, Jonathan Silver's parents won the day, and he went off with his tail between his legs to a college in America.
Yeah.
Cornell, yeah.
I just
Cornell.
took another year off and then never gone back, so I'm still taking years off. I do have contact with them now.
You're about to go back.
Yeah, probably.
What was the position with Jonathan King? I mean, he had some kind of a contract or a deal with you.
There was, I think, he took us along to Joe Roncarone's office, and they had a joint publishing venture. And, fairly typically we were being offered the record deal and the publishing contract. And it was a very long deal. And Jonathan, we said, well, you sure this is all right? And he said, yeah, look, here's my contract. It's just the same as this one. I signed this. It's all right. Go ahead and sign. And then, we went back and told Mum and Dad, and they were thinking, well, do you sign contracts? And then they found some legal advice for us. And because we were all, I think, underage I think, I don't know if it was 18 or 21 at that point, but the contract was then renegotiated with more reasonable terms and a shorter sentence.
Well, it was originally 5 years with a 5-year option, and that
Yes.
would have, if you think about it, we signed that in 1967 or 68. That would have taken us right through, right through the era with Peter and beyond,
Wasn't some of the publishing in perpetuity? There wasn't some of the publishing?
Yes, some of the publishing was in perpetuity, which wasn't that uncommon.
No, and the percentages were terrible, of course, as well, which is how it was in those days. So we managed to switch it to 1 year with a 1-year option, which was fortunate. And what we sort of did with Jonathan King was we knew he didn't, every time we tried to do something a little bit more ambitious, he didn't like it. We kind of knew that. So we sort of slowly just didn't send him anything and just drifted away. And he wouldn't have liked what we were trying to do, when we did the album Trespass, which was made up of sort of songs of that period and other bits and pieces we had around at the time, which was in similar ilk. He wouldn't have followed that at all. He was a pop man, and he was good at that, but he was not into the idea of a sort of 10-minute piece was not really
experimental or progressive, which was, it was what was driving us. And I think there was an important time was this last period with Jonathan's in Oxford, at Jonathan Silver's house, because although it was all acoustic, there was a thing called the movement. There were bits and pieces that appeared later, I think, in Stagnation and other things that were generated at that time. And it was, I think, a key moment for sensing what we could become musically. And we knew that that wasn't in line with what he saw for us or with his taste.
Yeah, we are quite influenced by the bands who are trying to be a bit more experimental. Obviously, sort of later period Beatles and the Beach Boys from that period, but groups like Procol Harum and Fairport Convention, although they're a sort of folky group, was sort of a bit more than that, I think. Family were another group.
For the very first time, we were listening to things in stereo, in headphones, and the Family's album, which was Music in a Doll's House, I remember.
And Family and Stone, both of them.
Yeah, was the first thing I'd ever heard in stereo like that, and it was, I think it blew us away.
Salty Dog.
Yeah, Richard McPhail's house is where I first heard it. He was the first person to get stereo, and he played with the two Procol Harum albums and stuff, you know, Shine On Brightly and Salty Dog, and just the sound was just fantastic. Never having experienced that before, you know. So I think things were changing very much. Late 60s, you know, suddenly the possibilities of music, you know, you weren't tied to the pop song and the three chords or how you were. And that was perfect for us because we wanted to kind of do something else, you know.
Restless is, it feels like it's got sort of a folk roots, but you're kind of pushing it more, a little more edgy, especially the knife, which is a surprising track at the end. Am I right in thinking that you're kind of just trying to decide what kind of a band you are still when you're trying out these different?
Well, in the Cottage, you know, looking back,
Cottage, yeah.
Without that, you know, it was a key moment, the Cottage. Also, because we weren't in London. Imagine we'd been in London, you know what I mean? Seeing other bands coming back saying, we were so cut off. It was quite intense, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But we liked
It was a good moment to be, you know, on your own.
We did like sort of aggressive music as well, you know. It's just the way the album ended up. You know, there was another song around at the time called Going Out to Get You, which was a sort of competitor with The Knife as to whether it got on the album, which is another very sort of up-tempo thing. And also the latter stages of Looking for Someone are quite up as well. I think, you know, it's just the
Contrast, really.
yeah, we liked contrast and we used them within songs later, you know, to a much greater extent. You know.
Yeah, and I think that was a key part of the writing. And Tony and I were particularly fans of The Nice. And although, you know, people remember Keith Emerson with Elp and all that stuff, at the time, The Nice were a very hip band, and Jimi Hendrix, you know, asked to play with them, and we'd go and see them at the Marquee, and I think The Nice was the working title for The Knife because it was, in fact,
Nice rhythm feel.
Yeah, inspired, and but we wanted that sort of mix of aggression and in the lyric, and we felt that this sort of contrast between the pretty, more imaginative, folky stuff, and then some hardcore rock elements with some soul references was something that hadn't really been explored before, and that's what I think excited us, was throwing it together.
I mean, talking about The Nice at the Marquee, it was actually the first gig I ever saw, and it's still the best gig I've ever seen. You know, I'd never experienced live music in this way. I'd heard music on record for years and years and loved it, and it was the first time I realised how good live music could be. I'd never thought of being in a live group before that, and it was just a very, very exciting moment. And it was very influential on us. I mean, I went there with Peter, and I think we were both completely.
Well, the volume too. The first live show, the volume is kind of scary. It's great, but it's kind of.
But there's performance in it as well, you know, and everything seemed good about it, you know.
Yeah.
They had a guitarist at that point. Davey List was with them as well. And I think
that's right.
when they were at their best was as a four-piece, better than when they lost him. And it was just, you know, well, I just found it so exciting, you know. Particularly Rondo was just
Rondo was the sort of creme de la creme of their stage set at that time, and it was something that was very showy performance and yet driving and very musical. So I think that was a good, it set the bar. The other thing, just in the early days, because I do think Ant's role needs to be emphasized, because in a way I think of all of us he was the most driven and the most pushy from a musical point of view.
And confident.
Yeah.
I mean, wasn't he musically very confident?
Yeah, I think you said.
I think he was the driver. I mean, him and Richard actually I almost feel the sort of the driving force, and we were there. But I mean, without those two, I'm sure we'd never really got to that next period in a sense.
Yeah, Rich was the eternal optimist, and whenever we had what seemed like an insurmountable problem, like where we could go, you know, he persuaded his parents to let us use their cottage, how we could move the gear around. He persuaded his dad to give up an old bread van.
Top speed, 45 miles an hour, unless you push the accelerator pedal to the left, with 48. Bloody slow.
Christmas Cottage was the his parents' house.
Yeah.
Am I right that you pulled a Hammer organ up?
Snowy steps.
It did, but there were many worse places that thing had to go. And when we got the Mellotron, it was even worse. I mean, there used to be, I remember one particular gig where we thought got a call from the crew saying we can't play it because we can't get the Mellotron up the stairs.
Nottingham Yacht Club.
And
How do I know that?
I don't know, he remembers it. And then about half an hour later, he rang up and said, it's okay, they've sawn off the banisters off the thing and they've got it up there. So incredible, really, you know.
There was another one, I think, sorry.
Go on. No.
In Glasgow, which I think was about 4 flights of stairs. We were absolutely exhausted getting the Hammond in particular at the top. And then we waited, I think the show's time was something like 8 o'clock. And so 9 o'clock, there were more people on the stage than there were in the audience. So we played 3 or 4 numbers and then decided to buy a pint for them and sit around and have a drink.
There were a few of those in those days.
Yeah. And there were probably other audiences that would have preferred the pint too.
This was before Tony Stratton-Smith. Was he on board at this point?
He was on board from the one once we started playing live, really, because from the Trespass album was released on Charisma, and so he was there. Yeah.
What was your? How did that come about? Was there an introduction to him?
It was John Anthony, wasn't it? John Anthony, producer, saw us.
Well, it was Rare Bird originally, wasn't it?
Was it Rare Bird?
Rare Bird was a group we
they're on
all
Charisma.
admired, particularly. I mean, I thought they were a really good live band. And we played them a lot of times. They had shinier gear than us, and they liked us. And they recommended their producer to come along and have a look at us, so he was John Anthony, and he liked us and brought Tony Stratton-Smith.
So that's right. First impressions of Tony Stratton-Smith.
Well, because he managed the noise, he was automatically a hero, and he, had some gravitas to him. He was quite a larger-than-life character, an ex-sports journalist, and he loved life, gambling. He was a gay guy, and it was interesting mix. I mean, there were a lot of the whole sort of gay manager story is still not really been properly told, I think, for the music business, because that would be a good documentary. Because anyway, he was passionate about the music, and once he got behind anything, he would really try and drive it. I mean, he would occasionally be a bit butterfly-like, and he'd be hot and then cold, and you could find your royalties buying a new racehorse. But oh shit!
It's all right. It's white.
Just water. Without him, I'm not sure. I mean, he was the next 3 albums. He was really on our.
Yeah, he was. They were prepared to back us, in a way. There was certainly no money being made. We were costing money, and there was no real. I mean, he obviously had faith that perhaps sometime in the future the group would. But we liked to spend money. We had an elaborate stage show, which got more elaborate as time went by, and it just they backed us. They gave us an allowance, if you like, and we didn't really get out of debt until well after Peter left. So it was kind of it was both good and a bad thing.
To lose some money,
And they also paid for us to go to New York, which was a key moment, I think.
Well, I think Stratton, not being a businessman, worked in our favour, because actually he had these lovely ideas, the New York trip and all these sort of tours we used to do. I mean, very brave, financially probably
I
chaos.
think we've said many times that, I mean, when we came into the business, it was run by amateurs, the whole thing. It was just enthusiasts. There was no professionalism in it at all. It was fantastic. Everybody just sort of did this, did that. There were one or two professionals in there, like our manager, Tony Smith, there were one or two people. But in the main, it was just enthusiasts who just loved music. That applied to the managers, applied to the groups, applied to the producers, everybody. That's what they were in it for, really. And no one realised that it was a money-spinning business until a bit later on. And then, of course, as soon as that was realised, then all the kind of pros came in.
I mean, it must have been essential for you, actually, at that point, to have an enthusiast on board.
Yeah.
You're travelling around in a old red van and
Yeah.
sitting on floors and all the rest of it. If you'd had a hard-nosed guy, you'd have said, you can't spend this money.
Well, our progress, it was slow progress. It was slow, like 2 or 3 albums, sort of slow, but wasn't it?
Yeah.
But there were no big jumps up, so no happening. So I think Strat was, and you go and see Strat for a meeting, and he'd inspire you, wouldn't he? You come out feeling, this is really, oh, it's just wonderful, they love you, you come out, you come out feeling, somebody said, sort of glowing, it's all going to be okay, actually. I remember that.
I mean, the only other label we were interested in was Island Records, because they were very stylish, had great artists, and we'd had another group, which was Mott the Hoople, who were championing us to Ireland in the same way that Rare Bird were to Charisma. And I remember we went for this meeting with Guy Stevens, who was he's a fairly legendary producer. And we went to his office, and we've been used to some other music business office, but his was an empty room with a telephone on the carpet. And I think, Guy, he was a wonderful character, but not very together and organized. So I don't think it ever got to Chris Blackwell. I've seen Blackwell a number of times since then. And we've laughed about it.
I think one of the reasons we didn't go with him was he wanted to change our name, and we thought that what little following we'd built up, this was after, it was sort of, our name was important because we had got a small following. We'd had a few concerts where it had gone quite well, and I think that was kind of the clincher almost of us not considering them. It sounds odd, doesn't it? But that was kind of a factor.
Yep, both our fans would have been upset.
Yeah, exactly. It would have probably been the best thing that ever happened to us, but it didn't. He wouldn't have mattered at the time, really, but he wanted something quite exotic, I think. I can't remember. But he was one of those kind of guys, sort of quite imaginative.
Yeah.
Now, let's talk about Ant leaving, because that was a big moment. How did that come about? Were you aware of Ant's problems?
Well, we were hearing about this panic, stage fright, and, I mean, we all got nervous, but I couldn't really get my head around it. Why, when you're so passionate about music and what we'd built up, why a little thing like stage fright should put you off. But he got more and more sort of resolute about it.
Yes, he's strange because
he'd been ill, to remember, angina fever or something. He really, but the funny thing is, looking back, we never really thought about having a chat and saying, I mean, looking at it, it's easy to say now, if you were 2 months out, give him time to get better, have a chat about it, discuss it. It was like, I felt we were just about up and running a bit. There was a glimmer of hope,
Yeah.
And suddenly had 3 months off. We were sort of, not mean, but a bit.
Well, I think we all were a little bit, we were probably pretty unsympathetic. I mean, because as Peter said, we were all kind of frightened. I mean, I'm not a performer in any sense, really, but I've been doing it. And you had to find a way of coping with it, was the way I looked at it. So now I'm quite prepared to believe he had more problems than that. But that was my attitude at the time. I was only, when he left, was 20 or something, So it was kind of...
but no discussion, was there? You think about it. Why don't you just sit down and say...
No.
But I assumed, actually, him leaving. I mean, you say about the 3-month thing. I think I'd quite happily gone for the 3 months. I assumed if he left, the band would split up. I didn't think there was any chance. And curiously, it was probably Richard talking to these two guys one time, saying you've got to carry on, and sort of, I kind of came in on the end of that, really. And I thought, well, why not? I suppose we can.
I remember, maybe wrong, I remember the last show, Hayward's Heath. You drove me back. I was in your car. And the start of the journey...
Was this a taxi?
No, it might
Gilman
have
Imp.
been. At the start of the journey, we were discussing, it was like, that's it, By the time we got to your place, we were like, Yeah, you know.
Just it.
Yeah, I think I sort of remember it that way. But it is funny looking back that we didn't sort of look at other options.
Did you feel, Peter, that this could be the end?
And was a huge musical force in the early band. And at the same time, you know, we were all songwriters. So I've always thought, looking at other bands, that bands that are full of songwriters have a better survival rate than bands with sort of one songwriter when there's a split. So, yeah, it was difficult and depressing, but as Mike said, I think it didn't take too much to gee us up and convince us that there was still something to explore.
Onwards and upwards.
Yeah.
I think what we're going to do is cut.
Yeah.
Phil and Steve, I don't know if Steve's here.
Yeah.
But they're going to come in.
Right.
Maybe we have a 10-minute breather.
Sure.
And then have
Sure.
5 of you
Sure.
in place.
Okay,
Right.
well, we managed to make it to 1970 at least.
Yeah,
That's right.
That's
Okay.
it.
That's okay, actually, because, yes, you're right. Next.
That's about right, shall I? You had a plan, I thought.
She
Yeah.
good.
Yeah,
She
you had a
good.
plan, yeah.
Yeah, great. Great.